Bernie, my tailor of 40 years, clamped his hand on my arm. His grip said what his mouth couldn't. Through the fitting room wall, my son's voice carried. Every word sharp, distinct. Once the power of attorney kicks in, I control everything. The accounts, the properties, the company shares. And here's the thing. He'll thank me for taking care of him right up until the nursing home doors close. I pressed flat against the dusty plaster. 40 years of suits from this shop. 40 years of trust. Bernie leaned close. Stay here. Trust me. Say nothing. On his shelf, a red light glowed steady, recording every word. Before the revenge unfolds, tap subscribe and tell me where in the world you're watching from. Thank you for being here. My name is Victor Ashford. I'm 64 years old. And until 3 minutes ago, standing in a fitting room with dust in my lungs and my son's voice in my ears, I thought I'd raised a good man. The voice through that wall proved otherwise. 40 years. That's how long it took to build everything Derek plans to steal. I started Ashford Construction in 1986 with a rusted F-150 and a toolbox my father gave me the day I turned 18. The truck cost $800. The toolbox was worth more in memory than metal. Dawn jobs, dusk finishes, salt white shirts from summer heat. Catherine shook her head when I told her. 2 years married, and I was throwing away steady pay for a truck full of tools. She was working as a nurse then, pulling double shifts at Memorial General while I chased contracts nobody else wanted. The small jobs, the ones that paid enough to keep the lights on, but not enough to matter. The night I signed my first commercial contract, a strip mall on Route 40, nothing special, she looked at me across our kitchen table. You'll build something. Her voice carried certainty I didn't feel. You've got the hands for it. She was right about the hands. Still have calluses across both palms, even now. Proof of what I built before success put me behind a desk. By 1990, I had 5 men on payroll. By 1995, 20. Each one hired with a handshake. By the time we broke ground on the new headquarters in 1999, Ashford Construction had become something that would last. But the thing I wanted most, Catherine and I couldn't build together. The doctors used words like unexplained infertility and consider your options. We considered them. For 3 years, we considered them while friends had babies and asked when we'd catch up. Then Derek came, a newborn boy with dark eyes and small fists that grabbed my finger the first time I held him. The adoption agency called him a miracle match. I called him my son. No qualifier needed. No distinction made. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Said it was happiness, but I caught her watching him sometimes, measuring something I couldn't name. I didn't understand that look until years later. Private school, from kindergarten through 12th grade. Summer camps, piano lessons he hated. Baseball equipment he loved. The bedroom, with the best light. Because Catherine said, children need natural light to grow right. When Megan came along 7 years later, a surprise the doctors called improbable, I worried how Derek would adjust. Biological child arriving after adopted son. The potential for comparison. For resentment. We love them both the same, I told Catherine. We do. She paused. But love isn't always received the same way it's given. I didn't understand that either. Not then. Derek graduated high school with honors. Not the top of his class, but respectable. Paid $120,000 for his business degree at a university, good enough to impress and close enough to visit. 4 years of tuition, room, and board, spending money wired monthly. I kept the receipts in a folder I never showed him. He came home with the degree and an expectation. The company was waiting. His place was assured. I started him in project management. Entry level. learning the business from the ground up, the way I'd learned it myself. Derek lasted 3 weeks on job sites before requesting a transfer to the main office. The dust bothered his allergies. The early mornings didn't suit his schedule. The workers looked at him wrong. I transferred him to the executive floor that same week. My hands signed the paperwork. My gut knew better. He'll grow into it, I told Catherine. She didn't argue, but that look crossed her face again. The measuring one, the watching one. Years passed. Derek rose through positions I created for him. Vice President of Operations, Chief Operating Officer. Titles that sounded important on business cards. At meetings, I noticed how he said my company when discussing plans. Never our company or the family business, just his. As if the nearly 40 years before his arrival were a footnote. I dismissed it as youthful pride, a phase he'd outgrow once he understood what building something really meant. His first marriage lasted 18 months. I learned about the gambling debts 3 weeks before the divorce was final. Derek's wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, called our house at midnight. She'd found credit card statements, online betting accounts. The total was $80,000 owed to places with names I didn't recognize. I paid it off the next morning. Didn't tell Catherine. Didn't tell Derek I knew. Just made the problem disappear, the way fathers do when their children stumble. He never thanked me, never mentioned it. I assumed he didn't know where the money came from. Later, I realized he simply didn't care to ask. The marriage ended anyway. His wife took half of what little he'd accumulated and left Baltimore for good. Derek moved into a new apartment downtown, the kind with a doorman and a gym, and started collecting watches. Expensive watches. The first was a Rolex Submariner I bought him for his 30th birthday. A mistake, looking back. It taught him a taste I shouldn't have encouraged. More watches followed. When I asked how he afforded them on his salary, Derek smiled. Investments. You wouldn't understand the market these days, Dad. The company's financial reports showed tight margins, barely breaking even some quarters, according to the statements Derek prepared for board meetings. I didn't question the numbers. My son prepared them. What was there to question? 5 years ago, I handed him daily operations. You're ready, I told him in my office. The one I'd built with my own measurements and specifications in 1987. I'll step back, handle the big picture. You run the day-to-day. Derek took the keys to the executive suite like I'd handed him a crown. Catherine watched from the doorway, saying nothing. That night, she asked me to review our estate documents. Said she wanted to update some provisions, add some protections. I signed where she pointed, trusting her judgment the way I always had. Just being careful, she said, when I asked what the changes meant. I didn't press. Should have. 8 months ago, Catherine received her diagnosis. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. The doctor used words like aggressive and limited options, while I held her hand and felt the world tilt sideways. She lasted 11 weeks. I spent those weeks at her bedside. Barely ate, barely slept. The company ran without me. Derek handled everything, he said. Don't worry about business. Focus on Mom. So I focused on Mom. I focused on the way her voice grew weaker each day. On the machines that beeped and hummed around her bed. On the moments when her eyes cleared and she squeezed my hand and told me she loved me. On the last night, she whispered something I didn't understand. 3 words that sounded like, check the documents. Or maybe catch the documents. Or maybe nothing at all. Just the sound of a mind letting go. She died at 34:07 in the morning while I held her hand. The funeral drew 300 people. Business associates, neighbors, friends from 40 years of building a life together. Derek gave a speech about family and legacy. Megan cried quietly in the front row. I sat between my children and felt nothing. For 3 weeks, I didn't change my clothes. Cast, ate standing at the counter, slept on her side of the bed. The colonial revival home she decorated with such care became a museum I curated alone. I didn't change anything. Didn't move her reading glasses from the nightstand. Didn't wash her coffee cup. Left her cardigan draped over the kitchen chair where she'd hung it the morning before we went to the hospital for the last time. 3 weeks after the funeral, Derek arrived with paperwork. To simplify things, he said, spreading documents across the kitchen table. Bank authorizations, account access forms, company papers requiring signature. I'm taking care of you, Dad. Let me handle the complicated stuff while you focus on healing. I signed everything. Didn't read a single page. What was the point? My son was helping. My son was taking care of me. That's what sons do. Derek paid the bills. Gave me $1,000 a month. Walking around money, he called it, like I was a child receiving an allowance for good behavior. I noticed, didn't object. In my workshop, I found something like peace. The garage behind our house, converted years ago into a space for woodworking, became my sanctuary. Derek never entered there, never showed interest in what I built. I craft puzzle boxes, have for 30 years. Each one takes months to complete. The smell of sawdust and cedar oil fills that space. My hands know the grain of walnut and cherry, the resistance of oak, the forgiveness of pine. Each box has hidden compartments that reveal themselves through specific sequences of movements. Press here, turn there, slide this panel. Each secret earned through patience. I gave Bernie Kowalski a puzzle box 40 years ago. He keeps it on a shelf in his tailor shop office, right where I noticed it this morning. Through the gap in the wall panels, while my son discussed stealing my life. The box I'm working on now has 17 compartments. My most complex creation. Cherry wood with maple inlay. The mechanism inside requires 47 distinct movements to reveal all its secrets. I started it the week Catherine died, building something with my hands because my heart wouldn't cooperate. Evenings, I sit at the kitchen table where we once ate together. One place setting instead of two. The chair across from me stays empty, but I talk to it sometimes. Tell Catherine about my day. What I built in the shop. What flowers are blooming in her garden. I should have noticed more. Should have questioned the papers Derek brought. Should have asked why he checked his watch so often during our conversations, that Rolex I gave him, as if he couldn't wait to leave. Should have seen what Catherine saw years ago. My son speaks of me like I'm already gone. At a country club lunch last month, he introduced me to business associates as my father. He's retired now, mostly rests at home. The pity in their eyes cut deeper than any insult. I smiled, said nothing, but that day something shifted. The same feeling I had the night before I fired my first foreman for stealing. Something older and colder than sorrow. I've built 200 commercial buildings in my career. Poured foundations myself, before success, made it impractical. My hands remember the weight of a cement form, the feel of fresh concrete setting up, the satisfaction of creating something solid from raw materials. Those same hands signed papers that gave my son control of my life. Trusted him because he was my son, because I raised him, because fathers trust their children. The trust was misplaced. Standing in Bernie's fitting room this morning, listening to Derek describe the fake wedding, the hired actress, the power of attorney, the nursing home 40 miles away where I'll be comfortable and quiet, I understood something important. The son I raised doesn't exist. Maybe he never did. Maybe that boy who grabbed my finger in the adoption agency was already broken in ways I couldn't see. Maybe Catherine saw the cracks and tried to build safeguards I was too blind to understand. Or maybe I made him this way, paid his debts without teaching him consequences. gave him a company without making him earn it, loved him without limits, and limits are what build character. It doesn't matter now. What matters is the recording Bernie made. 47 minutes of conspiracy, every word clear enough for a courtroom. What matters is the puzzle box I've been building for 8 months, hidden compartments waiting to be filled with evidence. What matters is the foundation I laid nearly 40 years ago, still solid beneath everything Derek thinks he controls. My son forgot something important in his planning. He forgot who built the house he's trying to steal. He forgot whose name is on the original documents, whose hands poured the first foundation, whose signature created everything he considers his birthright. He forgot that I'd been solving problems since before he was born. Quiet solutions. Patient solutions. The kind of solutions that reveal themselves through specific sequences of movements. Press here, turn there, slide this panel. Same patience I used laying foundations. Same precision I used reading blueprints. Through the fitting room wall, I can still hear Bernie's voice, calm and steady, keeping Derek talking. The red light on that shelf glows steady, recording every word. My son thinks he's the one in control. He's wrong. The morning Derek arrived with his leather portfolio, I was standing at the kitchen sink, washing the same coffee cup I'd washed 6 times that morning. Catherine's cup, the one with the chip on the rim she'd refused to throw away because I'd bought it for her on our first anniversary. 38 years of marriage, and that cup had survived every move, every renovation, every argument about whether it belonged in a museum or a trash bin. The grief hadn't lifted. It sat on my chest like wet concrete. Each morning, I woke expecting it lighter. Each morning, it had said a little harder. Derek let himself in with his key. I heard the front door, then his footsteps crossing the hardwood Catherine had picked out in 1992. He appeared in the kitchen doorway wearing one of his designer suits, the kind that cost more than my first truck. "Dad," he set the portfolio on the table. "We need to talk about some paperwork." I turned off the water. Set the cup in the dish rack. "What kind of paperwork?" "Just some things to simplify your life right now." He unzipped the portfolio and spread documents across the table where Catherine and I had eaten dinner for 32 years. Bank authorizations, account access forms, some company documents that need updating. The papers blurred when I looked at them, words swimming on white pages. My eyes couldn't focus. Hadn't been able to focus on much since the hospital. "I can handle this later," I said. "Dad." Derek's voice carried that new tone, the one that had crept in over the past few months. Patient. Slow. The way you'd talk to a child. "Let me take care of you. That's what sons do. You focus on healing. I'll handle the complicated stuff." I should have read every page. Should have called Harold Reeves, our estate attorney, and had him review the documents. Should have done what I'd done for 40 years in business, which was never sign anything without understanding exactly what it meant. But Catherine was dead. The house smelled like her perfume and her absence. My hands shook when I held a pen. I signed where Derek pointed. He gathered the papers with practiced efficiency, sliding each one into the portfolio like he'd rehearsed this moment. Maybe he had. "There," he said. "All done. I'll take care of everything." Within a month, I discovered what everything meant. The first hint came when I tried to pay for groceries at Morrison's Market. The checkout girl ran my debit card twice, then a third time. Each attempt declined. "I'm sorry, Mr. Ashford. It's saying insufficient funds." I'd banked with First National for 37 years. The account should have held $50,000 in operating cash, the same amount I'd kept liquid since 1989. I paid with a credit card and drove home to find a statement waiting in the mail. The balance showed $800. Someone had transferred the rest to an account I didn't recognize. under an authorization I didn't remember signing. But I had signed it 3 weeks ago, in my kitchen, without reading a single word. When I called Derek, his voice carried that patient tone again. Dad, we talked about this. I'm managing the household accounts now. You were having trouble keeping track of things. I wasn't having trouble. You forgot to pay the electric bill last month, and the water bill. I found the notices in your desk. He was right. I had forgotten. Grief does that. Makes you forget things that used to be automatic. I set up an allowance for you, Derek continued. 1,000 a month for personal expenses. Plenty of spending money. I'm handling everything else. $1,000. My own money, doled out in portions. My son determined appropriate. Derek, I don't need an allowance. I need access to my accounts. We'll revisit that when you're feeling better. His tone hardened just slightly. Trust me, Dad. I'm taking care of you. The line went dead. 6 months ago, Derek insisted on a family dinner. Megan drove up from her house in Towson with her husband and 2 kids. Derek brought his girlfriend, a woman he introduced as Jessica Monroe. Pretty, early 30s. Dark hair and a smile that flickered on and off like a faulty light switch. Something about the name felt rehearsed, too smooth. We gathered around the dining room table, the same table where Catherine had served Thanksgiving dinner for 3 decades. I'd set out her good china because that's what she would have wanted. The conversation turned to business. Derek was telling a story about a contract negotiation. One I remembered differently. That was the Patterson project, I said. We bid 40% below cost to get our foot in the door with the commercial development group. My idea. Derek laughed, turned to Jessica with that patient look. Dad, that's not how it happened. You're getting confused. Confused. He let the word sit there. Let everyone hear it. Megan's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Her eyes dropped to her plate. I'm not confused, I said. I was there. I ran that negotiation myself. That was 15 years ago, Dad. Derek's voice carried something new. Pity. Memory plays tricks. It's nothing to be embarrassed about. Jessica's head tilted slightly. She exchanged a glance with Derek, brief and coordinated, like they'd practiced the moment. The rest of the dinner passed in a fog. Every time I spoke, I caught that glance between them. Every time I contributed to conversation, Derek's expression shifted into that patient, pitying mask. Afterward, Megan cornered me in the kitchen while I washed dishes. Dad, are you okay? Pine? Derek says you've been forgetting things. Bills. Appointments. I forgot a few bills right after your mother died. That's normal. Megan's hands twisted together. The peacemaker. She'd been that way since childhood, smoothing conflicts instead of confronting them. Maybe you should talk to someone. Professional. I don't need a professional. I scrubbed a plate harder than necessary. I need people to stop treating me like I've lost my mind. She left without saying more. That was Megan's way. Concerned, but never confrontational. She'd witnessed Derek's disrespect and said nothing. Would keep saying nothing. The word followed me after that dinner. Confused. Derek used it on the phone. At company meetings. In conversations with business associates. Dad gets confused sometimes. It's hard, watching them age. Then the word evolved. Forgetful replaced confused. Then came senile, dropped in conversations Derek didn't think I could hear. The old man's getting senile. Sad, really. He used to be so sharp. I wasn't senile. Wasn't forgetful. The grief had lifted enough by then for me to see again, but each word landed like a brick, building a wall around me. Each repetition made the fiction more solid. The financial requests started small. Dad, I need $40,000 for company cash flow issues. The Patterson contract is delayed, and we're short on payroll. I transferred the money without verifying. Why would my son lie about payroll? The Patterson contract wasn't delayed. I found that out later. Derek's gambling debts had found him again, bigger than before. The $40,000 covered a fraction of what he owed. A month later, another request. $30,000 for equipment upgrades. The excavators are failing inspections. I transferred that too. No equipment was purchased. The money vanished into accounts I couldn't trace. When I finally sat down with my investment statements, the numbers made my chest tight. The $40,000 for cash flow. The $30,000 for equipment. Another $15,000. I couldn't trace. The numbers added up to $80,000 in 6 months. Transfers I hadn't authorized. Account changes I hadn't requested. I set down my coffee. Couldn't finish it. I called Derek's office. His assistant said he was in meetings all day. I drove to the company headquarters, the building I'd designed myself in 1987. 3 stories of red brick with my name carved in limestone above the entrance. The security guard stopped me at the door. "I'm sorry, Mr. Ashford. I'll need to check with Mr. Derek's office." "I built this building." "Yes, sir, but the access protocols have changed." I waited in the lobby while the guard made a call. 12 minutes. In my own building, Derek finally appeared, his expression tight with annoyance. "Dad, you should have called first." "I did call. Your assistant said you were busy." "I was in meetings." He steered me toward the elevator with a hand on my elbow, the way you'd guide an elderly relative at a funeral. "What's this about?" In his office, I showed him the statements, the withdrawals, the transfers. "I didn't authorize these," I said. Derek's face shifted. The patience disappeared, replaced by something harder. "Do you even understand how business works anymore?" His voice had an edge I'd never heard before. Not impatience, something colder. "The market's changed, Dad. Cash flow's complicated. These transfers are for operational expenses you wouldn't understand. I ran this company for 40 years, and I'm running it now." He stood, gathering the statements from my hands. "Let me handle the finances. You focus on your health. Maybe take up a hobby." I had a hobby. I built puzzle boxes in my workshop. Each one took months to complete. Each one contained hidden compartments, revealed through patience and precision. I said nothing, walked out of the office I'd designed, past the reception desk, where I'd hired the first secretary 40 years ago, stepped into the parking lot, where I'd poured the concrete myself. That night, Derek's insult echoed in my head. "Do you even understand how business works anymore?" I understood plenty. I understood that my son had taken control of my money, my company, my life. I understood that the son I'd raised had become someone else, or maybe had always been someone I couldn't see. But I also understood something Derek had forgotten. I was the one who built all of this. Every brick, every foundation, every dollar. He was living in a house I'd constructed, and I knew where all the hidden compartments were. 3 months ago, Derek suggested a change of scenery. "Dad, I think you'd be happier in a smaller place. Less to maintain." We were sitting in my living room, surrounded by furniture Catherine had chosen. The photographs on the mantel showed 40 years of marriage. Our wedding, Derek as a baby, Megan's christening, grandchildren. I barely saw anymore because Derek always had conflicts when I tried to schedule visits. "I'm fine here," I said. "It's a lot of house for one person. And the property taxes alone." Derek shook his head. "There's a place I've been looking at. Golden Pines Care Facility. Very nice. You'd have your own room, people to help with daily tasks." The brochure appeared from his jacket pocket. Glossy photographs of smiling seniors being assisted by uniformed staff. The words specialized memory care jumped from the page. 40 miles away. Far from anyone who knew me. Far from anyone who might ask questions. "I don't need specialized care. I kept my voice even. My memory's fine, Dad. That patient tone again. Nobody's saying you do. This is just an option for the future. I kept the brochure, added it to the folder where I'd started keeping documents, bank statements with unexplained withdrawals, letters from Patricia Vance, and estate attorney Derek had hired without my knowledge, discussing care provisions and estate planning in language designed to sound helpful while stripping away my rights. The office locks changed without notice. I discovered this on a Tuesday when I drove to headquarters for a board meeting. My key wouldn't turn. I stood there for 3 minutes, working the lock, before a junior accountant spotted me from inside. "Mr. Ashford, are you okay? My key doesn't work." Oh. Her face flickered with something. Embarrassment. Pity. "Mr. Derek had the locks upgraded last week. I think there's a new system." She trailed off. Didn't offer to let me in. Didn't call anyone to help. I drove home. That night, I learned my CEO salary had been reduced by 60%. A memo from accounting explained the change was approved by the board during a meeting I hadn't been notified about. Board meetings. I built that board, recruited every member, and now they made decisions without telling me. Because Derek told them I was senile, confused, forgetful. The country club lunch happened 2 weeks ago. Derek invited me to meet some business associates, new investors interested in the company's expansion plans. I wore my best suit. Bernie Kowalski had tailored it just last year. The private dining room at Willow Creek Country Club held 8 men I'd known for decades. The room smelled of old money and leather chairs. Crystal clinked against crystal. Frank Morrison from the development group, Ted Whitmore from the commercial lending division at First National. Men I'd done business with since before Derek was born. Derek made the introductions. "Gentlemen, you remember my father." He paused, his hand resting on my shoulder with practiced concern. "He's retired now, mostly rests at home these days." Men I'd done business with for decades looked at me the way you look at a dog that's been hit by a car. These men who'd shaken my hand on million-dollar deals, who'd trusted my word over contracts, who'd built their own success, partly on the foundation I'd laid. Now they saw an old man, a relic, someone to be pitied and dismissed. I smiled, said the appropriate things. Let Derek steer the conversation while I watched their expressions shift from respect to condescension. He checked that Rolex I'd given him, the birthday gift. Now it felt like evidence. "Do you even understand how business works anymore?" I understood perfectly. I understood that my son had spent 8 months building a narrative. The confused old man. The senile father who couldn't be trusted with his own affairs. The burden who needed specialized care in a facility 40 miles from anyone who might help him. I understood that Derek thought he was winning, but he'd forgotten something important in all his planning. He'd forgotten that I spent 40 years reading blueprints, finding faults hidden behind finished walls, solving problems nobody else could see. He'd forgotten that I built everything he was trying to steal. And he'd forgotten that patience isn't weakness. It's power. That night, I sat in my workshop, surrounded by sawdust and half-finished wood. The puzzle box I'd been building for 8 months waited on my workbench. 17 hidden compartments. 47 distinct movements to reveal all its secrets. I picked up my carving knife and made the next cut. The weight on my chest changed. Still heavy, but different now. Solid. Like a foundation setting up. The same calculation I'd applied to every impossible problem I'd ever solved. My son thought I was a victim. He was about to learn otherwise. Bernie Kowalski's shop sat where it had always sat, wedged between a dry cleaner and a print shop on Harbor Street. 40 years in the same location. The brass bell above the door rang out the way it had rung every visit since I was 24 years old, with a pickup truck and a dream of building something. Pressed wool, cedar, the faint chemical bite of dry cleaning solution from next door. 40 years of the same air. Bernie appeared from the back, tape measure draped around his neck like a priest's stole. At 68, he moved slower than he used to, but his eyes remained sharp. The eyes of a man who'd seen everything and judged none of it. Victor, he clasped my hand with both of his. Right on time. 40 years, and you've never been late. Wouldn't dream of it. His grip lingered a moment too long. His fingers shook against my palm. Not age. Something else. Bernie Kowalski didn't shake. Come, he said. Let me get your measurements. I'm thinking we adjust the shoulders slightly. You've lost weight since Catherine. He led me toward the back of the shop, past racks of suits in various stages of completion, past the antique mirrors that had reflected 40 years of my changing face. The familiar path, the trusted routine. But Bernie's hand found my elbow with unusual pressure. His eyes darted to the front window, then back to me. The back fitting room today, he said. Better light. Quieter. The front gets traffic noise this time of day. I'd never used the back fitting room. In 40 years of fittings, Bernie had always worked from the main floor, surrounded by his tools and fabrics. Bernie, what's going on? He stopped at the doorway to a narrow room I'd barely noticed before. Inside, a full-length mirror, a small bench, bare plaster walls. The room felt tight, cramped, nothing like Bernie's usual workspace. Your son, Bernie said, his voice dropping to something barely above breath. Derek scheduled a fitting for 30 minutes from now. My chest tightened. So? Last week, he was here. On the phone. Talking loud because he thinks old tailors are deaf. Bernie's jaw worked. He was discussing the old man's accounts. Your accounts, Victor. I heard enough to know something's wrong. Through the wall, I could hear the muffled sounds of the front shop. The brass bell. Footsteps. Voices. Bernie, I don't understand what you're asking me to do. He gripped my arm. His fingers dug into muscle, harder than I'd ever felt from him. Stay here. Trust me. Say nothing. What are you planning? Bernie positioned me against the wall. The plaster felt cool through my jacket. Thin. I could feel the structural weakness of it. A single layer of construction between this room and whatever lay on the other side. This wall, Bernie said, tapping it gently. It connects to my private office, where I take phone calls, where I keep my records. He paused. Where I'm going to serve your son coffee while we prepare the alterations. Understanding came slowly. Then, all at once. You want me to listen. I want you to hear what your son says when he thinks no one's paying attention. Bernie reached into his pocket and produced a small device. Silver, digital. A red recording indicator that remained dark. This will be on my office shelf, he said, capturing everything. But I need you to hear it yourself. I need you to know I'm not making this up. The brass bell rang in the front of the shop. Voices. Multiple people. Bernie's face went pale. They're early. He pressed me flat against the wall, one hand on my chest. Don't move. Don't speak. Whatever you hear, stay silent. Then he slipped through a connecting door I hadn't noticed, and I was alone. The wall against my back was barely an inch thick. Old construction. The kind of walls I'd stopped using in the 70s because sound carried through them like water through cheesecloth. Through a crack where the plaster had separated from the frame, I could see a sliver of Bernie's office. Bernie's voice came through first, warm and professional. Mr. Derek, welcome. And these must be your associates. Bernie. Derek's voice carried the casual authority of a man who believed himself in control. This is Patricia Vance, the estate attorney I hired to handle my father's affairs. And this is Jessica. Jessica. The name sent a chill down my spine. Derek's supposed fiancée. The woman from the dinner 6 months ago with the smile that flickered on and off. Please, sit. Bernie's voice moved toward the wall. Let me get coffee started while I prepare Mr. Derek's alterations. It will only take a few minutes. Actually, Derek said, we need to discuss some things privately. Is this room secure? Completely private. I take all my confidential calls here. The connecting door clicked. Bernie had left his own office. Left them alone with whatever they'd come to discuss. And left me pressed against the thinnest wall I'd ever stood behind. All right. Derek's voice dropped. But not enough. Not nearly enough. Patricia, walk us through the timeline again. A woman's voice, cold and clinical. The wedding is scheduled for 3 weeks from Saturday. Willow Creek Country Club. 200 guests. After the ceremony, you'll be established as a legitimate family caretaker. And the power of attorney. Filed Monday morning following the wedding. The documents are prepared. If your father cooperates and signs willingly, we proceed smoothly. If not, Patricia paused. I've been practicing his signature. The samples are convincing. The floor tilted. I pressed my palm flat against the wall. My own signature, forged by my son's attorney. What about the diagnosis? Derek asked. Dr. Mercer is ready. $75,000 for the incompetency paperwork. He's done this before. His assessments have never been challenged in court. Dr. Arthur Mercer. A name I'd never heard. The psychiatrist willing to declare me mentally unfit for $75,000. And after that, this from a third voice. Younger, female, uncertain. After that, Derek said, my father gets committed to Golden Pines Care Facility, 40 miles away. Very comfortable. Very quiet. And very, very isolated. Derek, the young woman's voice again. This feels different than what you described when you hired me. Tiffany. Derek's tone sharpened. You're being paid $50,000 to play Jessica Monroe for 6 weeks. That's the role. That's the job. What happens after the wedding isn't your concern. Tiffany. Her real name was Tiffany. $50,000 to play his fake fiancée. The woman I'd met at dinner. The woman whose smile flickered. She wasn't Derek's girlfriend. She was a hired actress. I signed up for acting, Tiffany said. Not elder abuse. It's not abuse. Patricia's voice cut through. It's estate planning. Mr. Ashford will receive excellent care at Golden Pines. His son is simply ensuring the family assets are properly managed. Properly managed into Derek's offshore accounts, Tiffany muttered. The Cayman Islands accounts are standard asset protection, Patricia said. Nothing illegal about establishing foreign holding companies. The transfers will be completed within 60 days of the competency ruling. I pressed my palm flat against the wall. My hand left a print in the dust. Old plaster, thin as paper. Look. Derek's voice rose. I owe $340,000 to people who don't send friendly reminders. They send broken kneecaps. The wedding happens in 3 weeks because my creditors expect payment by month's end. This isn't about preference. It's about survival. $340,000. Gambling debts. The same pattern from his first marriage, grown monstrous. Once the power of attorney kicks in, Derek continued, I control everything. The accounts, the properties, the company shares, all of it. My son's voice, my son's words, planning my destruction like a business transaction. And the best part? Derek laughed, a sound I'd heard 1,000 times. A sound that meant nothing to me now. He'll thank me for taking care of him right up until the nursing home doors close. I heard the clink of a coffee cup. Through the crack in the plaster, I saw Derek check his watch. The Rolex caught the light. My gift. 30 years ago. The forged signatures. Tiffany's voice again, smaller now. You're really going to do that if he doesn't sign? Patricia's been practicing for weeks, Derek said. My father's signature has a distinctive hook on the A. She's got it perfect. And the doctor, Tiffany pressed. This Dr. Mercer. He'll just lie about a man's mental capacity? For $75,000, Dr. Mercer would diagnose the Pope as schizophrenic. Derek's chair creaked. Relax. This is just business. Old people need care. Families need assets. We're simply accelerating the natural order of things. Your father built that company, Tiffany said quietly. Built it from nothing, according to everyone I've talked to. And I'm taking it to the next level. He's had his time. Now it's mine. Every word, another document in a file I hadn't read. Patricia, Derek said, run through the offshore structure again. Tiffany needs to understand what she's protecting by keeping her mouth shut. The Ashford Holdings, LLC, is registered in Delaware, Patricia began. A shell company. It feeds into a trust structure based in the Cayman Islands. Once the power of attorney is executed, all domestic accounts will be transferred to the trust. The house, the investment portfolios, the company shares, everything liquidated and moved offshore within 90 days. Untraceable, Derek added. Difficult to trace, Patricia corrected. Nothing is impossible, but the structure is designed to discourage investigation. By the time anyone realizes what's happened, the assets will have moved through 3 jurisdictions. Recovery becomes impractical. 90 days. 3 months. And everything I'd built for 40 years would vanish into accounts I'd never access. What about his daughter? Tiffany asked. Megan? Megan stays out of it, Derek said quickly. She gets a small settlement, enough to keep her quiet. She's always been the peacemaker. She won't make trouble. And if she does, then she gets nothing. The trust documents give me full discretion. My daughter, used as leverage. Her peacemaking nature turned into a weapon against her. The wedding venue is confirmed? Patricia asked. Willow Creek's Oak Room for the rehearsal dinner. Main ballroom for the ceremony. I've invited every business contact who matters. By the time the power of attorney is filed, 200 people will have witnessed my transformation into the concerned family caretaker. And your father will be there? Front row, smiling for the cameras. Too confused to understand what's happening. Derek's voice dripped with satisfaction. I've spent 8 months building the narrative. Everyone knows he's declining. Everyone's heard about his memory problems. The wedding just seals it. 8 months. He'd been planning this since a month after Catherine's funeral. While I grieved, he schemed. This still feels wrong, Tiffany said. Then think about the $50,000. Derek's tone hardened. You were working dinner theater when I found you. $600 a week, playing wife number 2 in some amateur production. Now you're getting 50 grand for 6 weeks of work. Smile. Look pretty, say I do, then disappear. Silence. We done here? Derek asked. I'll have the final documents ready by end of week, Patricia said. The wedding coordinator needs the seating chart by Friday. Tiffany. I understand my role. Her voice had gone flat. Professional. The actress remembering her paycheck. Chairs scraped. Footsteps moved toward the door. Bernie's taking forever with those alterations, Derek muttered. He's an old man, Patricia said. Everything takes longer when you're old. They laughed. My son and his attorney laughed about old men and what happens when everything takes longer. The door opened. Bernie's voice returned, warm and solicitous. Mr. Derek, I apologize for the delay. The fabric you selected required special handling. That's fine, Bernie. We'll reschedule the fitting for next week. Of course. Let me see you out. Footsteps receded. The brass bell rang. Then silence. I stood frozen against the wall. my palm still pressed to the plaster, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. My knees protested. I didn't move. The connecting door opened. Bernie appeared, his face gray. "Victor." He reached for my arm. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry you had to hear that." I looked at his office through the open door. The small shelf by the window. On it, beside the recorder, sat the puzzle box I'd given him 40 years ago. The digital recorder glowed steady red. "How long?" My voice came out rough. "Foreign. 47 minutes. Every word." I pushed past him into the office. The recorder sat exactly where he'd placed it. Small. Unassuming. A silver device capturing the complete blueprint of my destruction. "You got all of it?" Bernie nodded. "Every word." 47 minutes. The fake wedding. The forged signatures. The corrupt psychiatrist. The offshore accounts. The nursing home 40 miles away where I'd be comfortable and quiet. Every name, every dollar amount. Every crime planned in detail. My hands had been shaking since I'd heard Derek's voice. I noticed because they stopped. Just stopped. All at once, like a switch being thrown. I picked up the recorder. Felt its weight in my palm. Light. Barely anything at all. 40 years I'd spent building foundations. Solving problems. Finding faults hidden behind finished walls. My son thought he was building something. A scheme. A trap. A prison for his father. He'd forgotten who taught him about construction. He'd forgotten that the man who builds the house knows where all the weak points are. "Hand me that recorder." My voice dropped to a whisper. Steady now. The same voice I'd used to close million-dollar deals and fire men who betrayed my trust. Bernie placed it in my palm. It's time to stop being the victim. The morning after Bernie's fitting room, I sat at my kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and a cup of coffee I didn't drink. Catherine's photograph watched from the mantel. The grief was still there, but something colder lived beside it now. Something with edges. 40 years I'd spent solving problems, reading blueprints, finding faults hidden behind finished walls. Now, I had a different kind of blueprint to study, and 3 days to find every fault in my son's construction. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in 8 months. Harold Reeves, my estate attorney for 40 years, answered on the second ring. His voice carried the same gravel it had when I'd first hired him in 1984, back when Ashford construction was nothing but a truck and a dream. "Victor." No surprise in his tone. "I was wondering when you'd call. You knew?" "I suspected. Your son's been making inquiries through other attorneys. Word gets around when someone asks about competency proceedings for a man I've represented for 40 years. I gripped the phone tighter. "I need to see you. Today. I'll clear my afternoon." Harold's law office occupied the 3rd floor of a building I'd helped renovate in 1991. The elevator still creaked the same way. The hallway still smelled of old paper and leather. Some things don't change, even when everything else does. He met me at his door, white-haired now, but still sharp. 72 years old, with eyes that missed nothing. We shook hands, the way we'd shaken hands on every contract, for 4 decades. "Coffee?" he asked. "Just answers." Harold led me past his secretary into his private office. Filing cabinets lined one wall, floor to ceiling, each one labeled by year. 40 years of documents. 40 years of careful protection. He sat behind his desk and folded his hands. "Tell me what you know." I told him. The fitting room. The recording. Derek's voice describing the fake wedding. The hired actress. The corrupt psychiatrist. The nursing home 40 miles away. The forged signatures Patricia Vance had been practicing. The offshore accounts waiting to receive everything I'd built. Harold listened without interrupting. When I finished, he reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a thick folder. "Your wife came to see me 3 years ago," he said. "Alone? She said she was worried about Derek, about his gambling, about certain patterns she'd noticed in his behavior." My chest tightened. "She never told me. She didn't want to worry you. But she wanted protection." Harold opened the folder. "Catherine established a trust with very specific provisions. Provisions designed to prevent exactly what Derek is attempting." He slid a document across the desk. Legal language filled the page, but one paragraph jumped out. "Read section 4, Harold said. I read it twice, 3 times. The words blurred, then sharpened. "Any determination of incapacity affecting the grantor's control over trust assets shall require psychiatric evaluation by no fewer than 2 independent physicians, neither of whom shall have any prior professional relationship with family members or their representatives." 2 independent physicians, I said slowly. "Not chosen by Derek. Not paid by Derek." "Dr. Mercer's assessment would be legally worthless," Harold confirmed. Catherine anticipated someone might try to use a corrupt doctor. She built in safeguards. I stared at the document. Catherine's signature at the bottom. 3 years old. 3 years before her death, she'd seen something I hadn't. Protected me from something I couldn't imagine. "Your wife was smarter than both of us," Harold said. I touched her signature with my fingertip. The ink had faded slightly. The love behind it hadn't. "What else is in there?" I asked. Harold spent the next 2 hours walking me through everything. The trust provisions, the property records, the corporate documents I'd signed over 4 decades of business. By the time he finished, I understood something Derek didn't. My son had built his scheme on assumptions. Assumptions about what he controlled. Assumptions about what he could take. Every assumption was wrong. Martha Chen, a forensic accountant Harold recommended, occupied a corner suite downtown. All glass walls and computer monitors displaying financial data. She wore reading glasses on a chain around her neck and spoke in numbers the way some people speak in poetry. 3 years of records, I told her, sliding a folder across her desk. Ashford Construction. My son's been running operations. I need to know where the money went. Martha opened the folder, scanned the first page. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "These reports show the company barely breaking even." "That's what Derek told me." "And you believed him?" "He's my son." Martha's expression didn't change. She pulled her glasses from the chain and began reading. 3 days later, she called me back. The spreadsheets covered her entire conference table. Red highlights marked discrepancies. Yellow highlights marked suspicious transfers. Blue highlights marked outright theft. "Your company is profitable," Martha said, pointing to a column of figures. "Net revenue last year was $4.2 million. The reports your son showed you were falsified." I looked at the numbers. 4.2 million. Not barely breaking even. Not struggling to make payroll. 4.2 million in pure profit. Hidden behind fake reports. "The unauthorized transfers," Martha continued, moving to another spreadsheet. "I've identified $280,000 moved from company accounts over the past 3 years. 280,000. I'd known there was theft. I hadn't known the number." "Where did it go?" Martha pulled out a detailed breakdown. 43,000 to a luxury watch retailer. 22 purchases over 3 years. Another 61,000 to Willow Creek Country Club, membership fees and dining charges. 87,000 to various online gambling platforms, routed through shell accounts to obscure the source. Derek's watch collection, his country club lifestyle, his gambling debts. All funded with money stolen from the company I'd built. "There's more," Martha said. She pointed to a highlighted transfer. $50,000. Paid last month to a woman named Tiffany Cole. The memo line says, Event Performance Services. The actress. $50,000 to play his fake fiancée. Paid with my money. His salary, I said. What's his actual salary? Martha flipped to another page. $400,000 annually. Plus bonuses, totaling another $120,000 over 3 years. $400,000. Not the $150,000 he'd claimed. Not the modest income of a son struggling to keep the family business afloat. One more thing. Martha removed her glasses. Let that sit. You still own the controlling interest in Ashford Construction. Your son operates the company, but he doesn't own it. I looked up. Derek told me those shares were transferred years ago. The paperwork was never filed. The transfer documents your son prepared were signed, but they required board approval and registration with the state. Neither step was completed. 51%. The shares Derek assumed were his. The control he thought he'd taken. All of it built on paperwork that was never finished. My shoulders dropped an inch. The first time in months. The county records office smelled of old paper and bureaucracy. I spent 4 hours there, pulling property records, searching for documents Derek claimed were updated years ago. The family home. The colonial revival Catherine had decorated with such care. Derek told me the deed had been transferred, that it was just paperwork to simplify things. The deed remained in my name alone. The transfer had never been completed. Like the company shares, Derek's assumption of ownership existed only in his mind. Catherine's life insurance came next. The policy had named me as sole beneficiary. $500,000, paid directly upon her death, bypassing probate entirely. Derek didn't know this money existed. He'd never asked about the insurance. Never wondered where the payout went. $500,000 sitting in an account he'd never traced because he'd been too focused on the assets he could see. I made copies of everything. Property deeds, insurance records, company documents, trust provisions. Each page went into a folder, and each folder went to a different location. One set to Harold Reeves, locked in his safe. One set to Bernie Kowalski, hidden in his tailor shop office. One set to a new safe deposit box at a bank across town. A bank Derek had never heard of. Redundancy. Backup plans. The same principles I'd used building structures for 40 years. Jimmy Kowalski, Bernie's son and a private investigator, met me at a coffee shop near the courthouse. He had his father's sharp eyes and his mother's steady hands. Ex-military. The kind of man who noticed everything and said little. Patricia Vance, I said, sliding a photograph across the table. A state attorney. Downtown office. I need to know who visits her and when. Jimmy studied the photo. What am I looking for? My son, and anyone else connected to his plans. Jimmy pocketed the photo. I'll start surveillance tomorrow. Document everything. Photographs, times, license plates. That's the job. Jimmy paused. My father told me what happened in the fitting room, what your son is planning. His jaw tightened. Some people don't deserve the family they're given. I didn't argue. Ray Delgado, my first foreman at Ashford Construction, answered his door in work clothes. The same kind of flannel and denim he'd worn for 30 years on my job sites. 64 years old now. Retired, but still built like a man who'd spent his life lifting heavy things. Victor, he stepped back to let me in. Wasn't expecting you. I need your help, Ray. We sat at his kitchen table. I told him about Derek. About the theft. About the falsified reports and the gambling debts and the scheme to lock me away in a nursing home, 40 miles from anyone who might help. Ray listened the way he'd always listened. Quiet, thoughtful, taking it in before responding. I knew something was wrong, he said finally. Last 2 years, before I retired, Derek would come to job sites in his fancy suits, talk about cost cutting and efficiency, but the numbers never made sense. We'd finish under budget, and he'd still complain about margins. Would you testify to that? In court, if it comes to it. Ray's weathered hands flattened on the table. You gave me my first job in construction. Taught me to read a blueprint. I can read this situation just fine. He met my eyes. Whatever you need. The State Bar Association took my preliminary complaint against Patricia Vance the next morning. Ethics violations. Conspiracy to commit elder abuse. Forgery. They couldn't act immediately, the investigator explained. But the complaint was now on file. A paper trail. Evidence that I'd raised concerns before the crime was completed. I spent the afternoon in the law library, researching elder abuse statutes. The numbers were specific. 5 to 20 years for financial exploitation. Additional charges for conspiracy. Each co-conspirator facing individual counts. Derek, Patricia, Dr. Mercer. Tiffany, potentially, though her role might earn consideration if she cooperated. The legal framework existed. The evidence was building. All I needed was the right moment to deploy it. Harold called on the 4th day. His voice carried weight I hadn't heard before. I've obtained Patricia Vance's practice files through Discovery, he said. There's something you need to see. The documents arrived by courier that afternoon. Personnel records, client communications, and a folder marked with my name. Inside, I found practice sheets, page after page of signatures. My signatures, the distinctive hook on the A, the slight flourish on the D. Patricia Vance had been practicing my handwriting for weeks. The scheme had never depended on my cooperation. If I refused to sign the power of attorney documents, they planned to forge them. The wedding was theater. The concerned family caretaker narrative was theater. Everything was designed to create a paper trail that would survive scrutiny once I was locked away in Golden Pines. I sat in my woodworking shop that night, surrounded by sawdust and half-finished projects. The 17-compartment puzzle box waited on my workbench. Cherry wood with maple inlay. 8 months of careful work. I picked up my carving knife and made the next cut. Same patience, different target. 47 distinct movements to reveal all its secrets. That's what this box required. Patience, precision, understanding that the best revelations come through careful sequence. The rehearsal dinner was 3 days away. 200 guests. Every business associate Derek wanted to impress. Every family member he hoped to deceive. Every co-conspirator gathered in one room, celebrating a wedding that would never happen. Press here. Turn there. Slide this panel. I set down the knife and looked at the evidence folders stacked beside my workbench. Harold's documents, Martha's spreadsheets, Jimmy's surveillance photos, Ray's written statement, the recording Bernie had made. Every piece in position, every compartment ready to open. Derek thought he was building something. A scheme, a trap, a prison for his father. He'd forgotten who taught him about construction. He'd forgotten that the man who builds the house knows exactly where the walls are weakest. 3 days until the rehearsal dinner at Willow Creek Country Club. 3 days until 200 witnesses would hear the truth about my son. I picked up the puzzle box and ran my thumb along the grain. The wood held the heat from my hands, just like me. The oak room at Willow Creek Country Club looked like a wedding magazine spread. Crystal chandeliers cast amber light across white tablecloths. Champagne glasses caught the glow like captured stars. Flowers in silver vases lined every surface, their perfume mixing with expensive cologne and the faint metallic bite of money. 200 guests filled the room. Business associates I'd known for decades. extended family members who sent Christmas cards but never visited, local dignitaries who attended every event that offered free champagne and networking opportunities. All of them here to celebrate my son's wedding to a woman named Jessica Monroe. A woman who didn't exist. I stood near the entrance, watching the room through eyes that saw everything and revealed nothing. My posture hunched slightly. My steps shuffled, the image of a grieving old man, confused by crowds and overwhelmed by noise. Derek had spent 8 months building this narrative. The senile father, the confused patriarch, the burden who needed specialized care in a facility 40 miles from anyone who might help. Tonight, I would show him exactly how confused I was. Derek stood near the head table, designer suit cut perfectly to his shoulders, Rolex catching the chandelier light every time he gestured. He accepted congratulations with practiced grace, one hand resting possessively on the small of Tiffany Cole's back. She wore a white cocktail dress and a smile that flickered like a faulty bulb. Jessica Monroe. $50,000 to play a role for 6 weeks. Her contract specified event performance services, a phrase designed to hide the truth while protecting her legally. I'd made copies of that contract. Harold Reeves had the original in his safe. Patricia Vance occupied a chair at the family table, her black dress severe against the white tablecloths. She held a wine glass, with fingers that never trembled, eyes scanning the room with the cold calculation of a woman who'd built her career on discreet legal work for wealthy clients. Beside her sat a man I'd never seen in person until tonight. Mid-50s. Thin gray hair. The kind of face you'd forget 5 minutes after meeting him. Dr. Arthur Mercer. The psychiatrist willing to declare me mentally unfit for $75,000. His presence confirmed everything. The conspiracy wasn't theoretical anymore. Every player sat in this room celebrating a wedding that would never happen. Derek spotted me by the entrance. His face shifted through a quick sequence: surprise, calculation, condescension. He crossed the room with long strides, hand extended. "Dad." He gripped my shoulder with practiced concern. "Glad you could make it. I wasn't sure if the drive would be too much for you." I managed. "Come on, let me get you seated." He steered me toward a chair near the back, away from the head table, away from the other guests. The noise might be overwhelming. Just relax. Enjoy yourself. I let him guide me, shuffled my feet, kept my shoulders hunched. The confused old man, the burden, the victim, for 3 more minutes. A server passed with champagne. I declined, needed my hands controlled, needed my mind clear. The room filled with chatter and laughter. Business associates compared stock portfolios. Family members commented on the venue, the flowers, the expense. Everyone agreed Derek had done well for himself. Nobody mentioned how he'd done it. At 7:15, the wedding coordinator tapped a microphone at the head table. The room grew still. Derek rose from his seat, Tiffany beside him, and smiled at 200 witnesses to his manufactured success. "Thank you all for coming tonight," he began. "Jessica and I are so grateful to have our friends and family here to celebrate with us." The words rolled smooth and polished. Rehearsed, the same voice that had discussed, forged signatures, and offshore accounts through Bernie's fitting room wall. I stood up from my chair near the back. The movement drew a few glances. An old man rising slowly, joints protesting. Nothing unusual. I walked toward the head table. Derek noticed my approach mid-sentence. His expression flickered with annoyance, then shifted to that patient smile. "Dad, what are you doing? We're in the middle of the toast. I'd like to say a few words." My voice carried the same elderly rasp I'd been cultivating for weeks. "If that's all right." Derek's smile tightened. He looked at Patricia, then at the crowd, calculating whether refusing his senile father would play well to the audience. "Of course, Dad." He stepped aside from the microphone. Take your time. I reached the head table, stood before the microphone. 200 faces watched me, with expressions ranging from polite attention to barely concealed pity. The confused old man, the burden, the victim. I straightened my spine. The hunch disappeared. The shuffle vanished. 40 years of boardroom presence settled across my shoulders like armor. Derek's smile faltered. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight, I said, my voice carrying with clarity that made several guests lean forward in surprise. Before we begin, I have a gift for the happy couple. I reached into my jacket pocket and produced Bernie's digital recorder. Small, silver. The device that had captured 47 minutes of conspiracy in a tailor shop fitting room. Derek's face went pale. Dad, what is that? What are you doing? I ignored him, turned to the wedding coordinator. Can you connect this to the sound system? She looked confused, but took the device. Within 30 seconds, the recorder was plugged into the speakers that would have played wedding music. I pressed play. Derek's voice filled the oak room. Once the power of attorney kicks in, I control everything. The accounts, the properties, the company shares, all of it. Every voice stopped. Every champagne glass froze halfway to lips. Every conversation died mid-word. And the best part? Derek's recorded voice continued. He'll thank me for taking care of him, right up until the nursing home doors close. Derek lunged toward the sound system. His designer shoes slipped on the polished floor. Before he made it 3 steps, 2 men in dark suits intercepted him. Private security I'd hired through Jimmy Kowalski. Their hands closed on Derek's arms with professional restraint. Let go of me, Derek thrashed against their grip. This is my rehearsal dinner. You can't do this. The recording continued. Tiffany's voice emerged from the speakers, uncertain and young. This feels like elder abuse. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Frank Morrison from the development group set down his champagne glass, his face draining of color. Patricia's voice came next, cold and clinical. The Ashford Holdings, LLC, is registered in Delaware. A shell company. It feeds into a trust structure based in the Cayman Islands. Business associates exchanged alarmed glances. These were men who understood offshore accounts. Men who recognized the language of financial crime. The transfers will be completed within 60 days of the competency ruling. Patricia's voice continued. Patricia Vance rose from her chair at the family table. Her wineglass trembled for the first time. She gathered her clutch and moved toward the exit, heels clicking against the hardwood floor. The doors opened before she reached them. 2 police officers stepped inside, badges visible on their belts. Mrs. Vance. The taller officer blocked her path. We need you to return to your seat. Patricia's composure cracked. Her eyes darted around the room, looking for escape routes that didn't exist. The officers escorted her back to the family table with hands that didn't touch, but promised they would if necessary. The recording kept playing. Dr. Mercer's voice emerged, nasal and clinical. The diagnosis paperwork is prepared. $75,000, as agreed. Dr. Mercer stood abruptly, knocking his wineglass to the floor. Red liquid spread across the white tablecloth like blood. This recording is doctored. His voice cracked on the last word. Audio can be manipulated. This proves nothing. I reached into my jacket again, produced a manila folder. Signed statements from 2 forensic audio experts, I said, my expression unchanged. Both confirm the recording is authentic. Unedited. 47 minutes of continuous audio with verified timestamps. Dr. Mercer's face went gray. He sank back into his chair. The recording continued for another minute. Derek's voice discussing gambling debts. $340,000 owed to people who don't send friendly reminders. Patricia's voice explaining the forged signature samples. Tiffany's voice, asking uncomfortable questions that had finally received answers. I pressed stop. The stillness in the oak room felt physical. 200 people stared at me, at Derek, at the conspirators scattered around the room like pieces of a broken puzzle. Tiffany Cole stepped away from the head table. Her white cocktail dress burned under the chandelier light. She raised both hands, palms out, and walked toward me. "Mr. Ashford," her voice shook but carried clearly, "I'll testify to everything." Derek's head snapped toward her. "You stupid." "I kept my contract," Tiffany continued, ignoring him. She reached into her clutch and produced a folded document. $50,000 for event performance services. "It's all documented. I want immunity." She handed me the contract. Derek's signature at the bottom. A paper trail connecting him to every element of the scheme. "You worthless." Derek lunged against the security guard's grip. "I paid you $50,000 to keep your mouth shut." One of the police officers stepped forward. "Sir, you have the right to remain silent." Derek kept screaming. About his rights, about false accusations, about how he'd built the company while I sat in my workshop, playing with blocks of wood. The officer continued reading Miranda rights, while Derek's voice rose to something inhuman. I turned to face the crowd. My son planned to steal my company. My voice carried across the room, with 40 years of authority behind it. The company I built with my own hands. He planned to forge my signature on power of attorney documents. He bribed a psychiatrist to declare me incompetent. I let the words settle. He planned to lock me in a nursing home 40 miles away. A place called Golden Pines Care Facility. Specialized memory care. I paused. That's what they call it when they want to make someone disappear. Frank Morrison stood up from his table. His voice came out rough. "Victor, I had no idea. None of us knew." "I know, Frank." I met his eyes. "That's why I'm telling you now." I produced more documents from my jacket. The trust provisions Catherine had established 3 years before her death. The property deeds that had never been transferred. The forensic accounting reports showing $280,000 in theft. "My late wife saw something in Derek that I couldn't see," I continued. "She built safeguards into our estate documents. Safeguards that required 2 independent physicians to evaluate my competency. Physicians not chosen by family members or their representatives." I looked at Dr. Mercer, still slumped in his chair. Dr. Mercer's $75,000 diagnosis wouldn't have survived a court challenge. My wife made sure of that. Patricia Vance's professional mask had shattered completely. She sat rigid between 2 police officers, her face the color of old paper. "I still own 51% of Ashford Construction," I said. "The transfer documents my son prepared were signed but never filed. Never approved by the board. Never registered with the state." Derek's screaming had faded to something hoarse. The officers held him firmly, waiting for him to exhaust himself. My son forgot something important in all his planning. I looked directly at him. He forgot who built everything he tried to take. He forgot whose hands poured the first foundations. Whose name is on the original documents. I paused. Let the words land. He forgot that I'd been solving problems since before he was born. In the corner of the room, my daughter Megan stood with tears streaming down her face. She'd been there the whole time, frozen in place, while the truth poured from the speakers. Her husband had his arm around her shoulders. Her children were at home with a babysitter, spared this particular family history. She approached me slowly, trembling with each step. "Dad," her voice came out broken. "I didn't know. I knew Derek was planning something about your care, but I didn't know all of it. I swear I didn't know about the forgery, the offshore accounts, any of this." I looked at my daughter, the peacemaker, the one who'd smooth conflicts instead of confronting them. She'd witnessed Derek's disrespect and said nothing. Had stayed still while her brother gaslit me at family dinners. But there was a difference between willful ignorance and active conspiracy. Megan had been naive. She hadn't been criminal. "I believe you," I said. She collapsed against me, sobbing. Her grip was tight, desperate. She smelled of the same perfume Catherine used to wear. I held her the way I'd held her when she was small. When nightmares woke her at midnight, and only her father's arms made her feel safe. Behind us, the officers secured handcuffs around Derek's wrists. The metal clicked with a sound that carried across the still room. Derek's Rolex caught the chandelier light as his hands were pulled behind his back, the birthday gift I'd given him 30 years ago, now marking the end of everything he'd tried to steal. "This isn't over," Derek shouted. "That company was supposed to be mine. My lawyer will have all of you." His voice cut off as the officers escorted him toward the exit. The crowd parted like water around Stone. Business associates, family members, and local dignitaries watched my son being led away in handcuffs, his designer suit disheveled, his carefully constructed image shattered beyond repair. Patricia Vance followed, a police officer on each side. Dr. Mercer came next, his medical career ending with every step toward the door. The Oak Room emptied of conspirators. What remained was champagne going flat, flowers losing their fragrance, and 200 witnesses to the truth. I set the recorder on the head table, where my son had accepted congratulations an hour ago. The microphone still hummed with static. 40 years I'd spent building foundations, solving problems, finding faults hidden behind finished walls. Derek thought he'd been building something. A scheme, a trap, a prison for his father. He'd forgotten who taught him about construction. He'd forgotten that the man who builds the house knows exactly where the walls are weakest. Press here. Turn there. Slide this panel. The puzzle box had revealed its secrets to those with patience. 3 months passed after the rehearsal dinner. That's how long it takes to watch everything a man built on theft collapse into dust. The morning after the exposure, I woke in my own bed for the first time in months without the weight of Derek's scheme pressing on my chest. Catherine's chair sat empty at the kitchen table. Her coffee cup waited in the cabinet. But the weight on my chest had changed shape. The concrete had set in a different formation. Derek's bail hearing happened 2 days later. I didn't attend. Harold Reeves, my estate attorney for 40 years, called me with the details while I sat in my woodworking shop, sanding the edges of the 17-compartment puzzle box. $500,000, Harold said. Cash or bond. I set down the sandpaper. Can he raise it? His assets are frozen, pending the fraud investigation. The watch collection is seized as evidence. His apartment lease was paid with company funds, which means it's part of the criminal case. Harold paused. He's got nothing, Victor. Nothing that's actually his. Derek sat in county jail. The designer suits replaced by an orange jumpsuit. The Rolex no longer on his wrist because it sat in an evidence bag, tagged and catalogued as proceeds of fraud. I finished sanding the puzzle box, started on the next compartment. The gambling creditors moved fast. Within a week of Derek's arrest, 3 separate civil suits landed on the docket. The $340,000 he'd owed to people who don't send friendly reminders became a matter of public record. Lawyers I'd never heard of filed motions. Debt collectors contacted the court. The weight of Derek's hidden life piled on top of his criminal exposure. Jimmy Kowalski, Bernie's son, and the private investigator who'd helped me gather evidence, brought me the surveillance photographs he'd taken of Patricia Vance's office over the past month. Her expensive downtown suite, the one with the mahogany desk and the view of the harbor, had emptied within days of the rehearsal dinner. Staff quit by Wednesday, Jimmy said, sliding the photos across my kitchen table. Clients started calling other firms Thursday morning. By Friday, The building manager was asking about her lease. The photographs showed moving boxes stacked in the hallway. Patricia's name removed from the directory board. The brass nameplate that had spelled Vance and Associates pried off the door, leaving screw holes in the wood. The State Bar Association opened their investigation yesterday, Jimmy continued. Ethics violation. Conspiracy to commit fraud. Forgery. I looked at the photograph of the empty nameplate holes. The woman who'd practiced my signature for weeks, who'd discussed offshore accounts and competency hearings like she was ordering lunch, was now a case file herself. Her wealthy clients, Jimmy said. The ones who hired her for discreet legal work. They're panicking. Word spreads fast when an attorney faces disbarment. Everyone she ever helped hide money is wondering what else might come out in the investigation. Patricia Vance had treated me like a problem to be solved, a case file to be processed, an old man whose assets needed restructuring. Now she was the problem, and the restructuring was happening to her. Dr. Arthur Mercer's collapse came faster than Patricia's. The state medical board revoked his license the same week as the rehearsal dinner. The recording was clear. His voice was distinct. $75,000 for a false incompetency diagnosis. No ambiguity. No room for interpretation. Harold called me with updates as they came in. Federal authorities added charges of medical fraud. Mercer's bank records showed the pattern. Other elderly patients whose families had paid for convenient diagnoses. The investigation expanded. More names emerged. He tried to run, Harold said. Airport security stopped him at the gate. One-way ticket to Costa Rica. $50,000 in cash in his carry-on. I thought about the man I'd never seen until the rehearsal dinner. The thin gray hair, the forgettable face. The psychiatrist willing to declare me mentally unfit for the right price. His gambling addiction emerged during the investigation. The same disease that had consumed Derek. Two desperate men enabling each other's crimes. Mercer was arrested at the airport with the cash still in his bag. The boarding pass for Costa Rica became another piece of evidence. Flight from prosecution. Consciousness of guilt. The pieces kept falling. My first board meeting in 2 years happened 3 weeks after the rehearsal dinner. The conference room on the 3rd floor of the building I'd designed in 1987. The same table where I'd made decisions that built a company worth $12 million. The faces around that table had changed. Some I recognized. Frank Morrison from the development group. Ted Whitmore from First National. Men I'd done business with for decades. Others were newer, hired during Derek's tenure, watching me with expressions that mixed respect with uncertainty. I took my seat at the head of the table. The chair felt right. The position felt earned. Gentlemen. I looked at each face in turn. I'm resuming control of Ashford Construction. No objections. No questions. The vote was unanimous. Derek was removed from all positions that same afternoon. His office, the one he'd remodeled with glass walls and modern furniture, was cleared by building security. The nameplate came off the door. His personal effects were boxed and stored in the basement, pending the outcome of the criminal trial. I walked through that office after the staff had gone home. The space echoed. Empty shelves, blank walls. The desk where Derek had sat, making decisions with money that wasn't his, planning a future built on my destruction. I turned off the lights and closed the door. Martha Chen, the forensic accountant Harold had recommended weeks earlier, presented her final report at the end of the first month. Her spreadsheets covered the entire conference table. Red highlights, yellow highlights, blue highlights. The complete anatomy of Derek's theft. $280,000 in direct theft over 3 years, Martha said, pointing to a column of figures. The watch purchases, the country club memberships, the gambling platforms. I nodded. I'd known this part. But the additional unauthorized expenditures bring the combined total to $620,000. She moved to another spreadsheet. His apartment lease, his car payments, his dry cleaning bills, his restaurant tabs, all charged to company accounts under expense categories he created to hide personal spending. $620,000. More than $500,000 stolen from the company I'd built with my own hands. The watch collection, Martha continued. 23 luxury timepieces. The appraisers valued it at $215,000. The Patek Philippe alone was worth $85,000. The watches were now evidence. Seized. Tagged. Stored in the same evidence locker as the Rolex I'd given Derek for his 30th birthday. I thought about that birthday. The restaurant Catherine had chosen. The cake with 30 candles. Derek's face when he opened the box and saw the watch inside. The hug he'd given me. The words he'd said. "Thanks, Dad. I'll treasure this forever." Forever lasted until the evidence bag sealed it shut. The Cayman Islands, accounts Patricia had established, were frozen within 2 weeks. International banking authorities cooperated. The offshore structure designed to make recovery impractical became the target of a coordinated investigation. The money Derek and Patricia had planned to steal sat locked in accounts neither of them could touch. Derek's lifestyle collapsed, piece by piece. The apartment, paid with stolen funds, was reclaimed by the property management company. The country club membership, funded by company accounts, was terminated. The designer suits, the expensive restaurants, the image of success he'd cultivated for years, all of it evaporated as the stolen funding was cut off. In county jail, waiting for trial, Derek had nothing. Not even the clothes on his back, which belonged to the county. Tiffany Cole testified for the prosecution. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined. Federal District Court. Wood paneling and fluorescent lights. The judge's bench raised above the floor, looking down on the proceedings with institutional gravity. I sat in the gallery, watching. Tiffany took the stand in a simple dress, her hair pulled back, her face scrubbed of the makeup she'd worn as Jessica Monroe. She looked younger, more vulnerable. The actress playing her most important role, this time under oath. The prosecutor walked her through the timeline. The audition Derek had arranged. The contract specifying event performance services. The $50,000 that had seemed like a fortune to a woman working dinner theater for $600 a week. When did you realize the scope of what you were involved in? The prosecutor asked. Tiffany's hands twisted in her lap. Not until the fitting room conversation, when they discussed the forged signatures. The nursing home. That's when I understood it wasn't just acting. And what did you do with that understanding? I kept my head down. Her voice dropped. I'd already taken the money. I didn't know how to get out without making everything worse. The prosecutor introduced her contract as evidence. Derek's signature at the bottom. A paper trail connecting him to every element of the scheme. After her testimony, Tiffany approached me in the hallway outside the courtroom. Her heels clicked against the marble floor. Her eyes couldn't meet mine. Mr. Ashford. She stopped 3 feet away. I wanted to say something to you directly. I waited. I grew up poor. Her voice cracked. The kind where you skip meals and wear clothes until they fall apart. When Derek offered me $50,000 for 6 weeks of work, I didn't ask questions. I should have asked questions. I said nothing. I thought it was just acting, Tiffany continued. Play a role. Smile for the cameras. Collect the check. By the time I understood what I was really part of, I didn't know how to get out. She paused. That's not an excuse. I know it's not an excuse. I just wanted you to understand. I looked at her. 29 years old. Poor background. Struggling career. Offered more money than she'd ever seen for work that seemed harmless, until it wasn't. She'd been a tool, a prop in Derek's scheme. Not innocent, But not the architect either. I accept your apology, I said. No warmth in my voice. No condemnation either. Just acknowledgement. Tiffany nodded once, then walked away. Her heels echoed in the marble hallway until she turned a corner and disappeared. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I attended every day, sat in the same seat in the gallery, watched the prosecution present evidence I'd helped gather, listened to witnesses describe Derek's behavior, his demands, his casual cruelty toward the father who'd given him everything. Ray Delgado, my first foreman at Ashford Construction, and the man who'd worked beside me since the beginning, testified about the falsified company reports. Martha Chen walked the jury through the forensic accounting. Harold Reeves explained the trust provisions Catherine had established to protect me. Bernie Kowalski took the stand to authenticate the recording. His voice was steady as he described positioning me against the fitting room wall, pressing record on the device, capturing 47 minutes of conspiracy. Derek sat at the defense table throughout, his attorney whispering in his ear, his face shifting between defiance and defeat. The orange jumpsuit made him look smaller somehow. The absence of the Rolex left his wrist bare and vulnerable. He never looked at me. Not once. The verdict came on a Thursday afternoon. We, the jury, find the defendant, Derek Ashford, guilty on all counts. Elder abuse. 5 to 20 years. Fraud. Additional 5 years. Conspiracy to commit financial exploitation. Additional charges for each co-conspirator he'd recruited. Derek's head dropped when the forewoman finished reading. His attorney's hand found his shoulder. Neither of them spoke. Sentencing happened 2 weeks later. Patricia Vance stood before the judge first. Her expensive suit couldn't hide the weight she'd lost, the gray that had appeared in her hair since the rehearsal dinner. The cold professional efficiency was gone. In its place, the hollow expression of a woman watching her life disintegrate. 8 years federal prison, the judge said. Permanent disbarment from the practice of law. Patricia's legs buckled. The bailiff steadied her. Dr. Mercer came next. The forgettable face, now memorable for all the wrong reasons. The gambling addiction that had driven him to sell false diagnoses, exposed in court documents, in testimony, in the pattern of patients whose families had paid for convenient evaluations. 6 years federal prison, the judge said. Lifetime revocation of medical credentials. Mercer said nothing, stared at the floor. The man who would have declared me incompetent for $75,000. Led away in handcuffs. Then Derek, my son, stood before the judge in his orange jumpsuit. His attorney had tried for leniency, citing first offense, family dynamics, the stress of running a company. The judge had listened without expression. Now she looked at Derek the way I'd looked at foundations that had failed inspection. Calculating the structural damage. Measuring the extent of the collapse. Mr. Ashford, the judge began, the crimes you've committed represent more than financial fraud. They represent a betrayal of the most fundamental human relationship. Derek's shoulders tensed. Your father built a company with his own hands, raised you, educated you, trusted you with the legacy of his life's work. The judge paused. And you repaid that trust with a scheme designed to steal everything he'd built and imprison him in an institution 40 miles from anyone who might help. The courtroom was silent. Not a whisper, not a cough. The defendant's betrayal of his own father represents a profound moral failure that this court cannot overlook. I watched Derek's face. The arrogance that had carried him through years of theft and deception had drained away. What remained was something I didn't recognize. Not the boy I'd adopted. Not the man I'd trusted. A stranger in an orange jumpsuit, waiting to hear how long he'd spend in a cell. 12 years federal prison, the judge said. Credit for time served. Derek's attorney nodded. Derek didn't move. Additionally, the judge continued, Full restitution of all documented theft, to be paid from any assets recovered through the ongoing investigation. The bailiff approached. Handcuffs clicked around Derek's wrists. The sound echoed in the quiet courtroom. As they led him toward the door, Derek looked at me. The first time since the trial began. Not with anger, not with defiance. Something else in his eyes. Something that might have been recognition, if it wasn't too late for that. I held his gaze. The bailiff guided him through the door. The last thing I saw was the bare wrist where the Rolex used to be. The Rolex. My gift. Years ago, wrapped in paper I'd picked out myself, given with love I'd thought was returned. Now it sat in an evidence bag. Tagged. Catalogued. Another artifact of a relationship that had crumbled into dust. The courtroom emptied around me. My hands stayed still. My breath stayed even. Whatever I was supposed to feel hadn't arrived yet. Harold appeared at my side, his hand on my shoulder. "It's over, Victor." I nodded. Outside, the November air carried a chill that cut through my coat. The sun was setting, painting the courthouse steps in shades of orange and red. Megan waited by her car, her face uncertain, her hands twisting the way they'd twisted since she was a girl. She'd attended the sentencing too, watched her brother led away in handcuffs, heard the judge describe his crimes in language that left no room for denial. "Dad," her voice cracked. "I don't know what to say." I walked to her car, stopped an arm's length away. "You don't have to say anything. He's my brother." Tears streaked her cheeks. "He's still my brother, and I can't make that not matter. But what he did to you, he made his choices," I said. "Now he lives with the consequences." Megan nodded, wiped her face with the back of her hand. "Can I drive you home?" I looked at the courthouse behind me, the building where justice had been delivered, the place where Derek's scheme had collapsed. "Yes," I said. "Take me home." If you're feeling my revenge, hit like and drop a rating from 1 to 10 with your thoughts. I appreciate you. 6 months after Derek's sentencing, I sat on the porch of a cottage I'd bought with cash from an account he never knew existed. The lake stretched out before me, steel-colored under November clouds. No wind, no waves, no colonial revival architecture. No rooms Catherine had decorated. No ghosts waiting in doorways. The family home sold in 3 weeks. A young couple with a son. They planned to renovate the kitchen, add a sunroom, make it theirs. I signed the papers without looking back. Some foundations you walk away from. Others you build fresh. Megan's car appeared on the gravel drive at 10, same as every Saturday. She'd proven her innocence during the investigation. Every document, every timeline, every conversation with Derek examined and cleared. She'd known something was wrong with my care arrangements. She hadn't known about the forgery, the offshore accounts, the actress playing his fiancée. The peacemaker had been naive, not criminal. Each Saturday she arrived at 10. Each Saturday we talked a little longer. 30 minutes became an hour. An hour became lunch. Her son running on the lawn while we said things we'd both been afraid to say for years. Her boy, my grandson, jumped from the car before Megan cut the engine, backpack bouncing against his shoulders. "Grandpa." He ran toward the porch. I stood to meet him. My knees protested less these days. The cottage had 1 floor. No stairs to climb. "I finished the bird feeder," he said. "Mom helped with the saw part, but I did the nails myself." "Good man." Megan followed behind, carrying a casserole dish. Her way of caring. Food and presents. She'd learned it from her mother. "Dad." She kissed my cheek. "You look rested." Getting there. We ate lunch at the small table by the window. The boy talked about school, about his bird feeder, about a frog his friend had caught. After lunch, I took the boy to my workshop. The garage was smaller than the one at the old house. Enough room for a workbench, my tools, the materials I needed. Sawdust covered the floor. The smell of cedar and wood oil filled the space. The workbench creaked when I leaned against it. Some things don't change. The puzzle box sat on the workbench. 17 compartments. Cherry wood with maple inlay. 8 months of work, started the week Catherine died, finished last Tuesday. 47 distinct movements to reveal all its secrets. I turned the puzzle box over in my hands. Felt its weight. "This is for you," I said. The boy's eyes went wide. He stopped mid-step. He knew about my puzzle boxes, had watched me work on simpler ones during his visits. But this one was different. He could see it in the complexity of the joints, the precision of the inlay. "For real? For real." He took it from my hands, with the care of someone handling something precious. Turned it over, ran his fingers along the grain. "Take your time," I said. "The best things reveal themselves slowly." He nodded, set the box on the workbench, and studied it. His fingers found the first panel, the one that looked fixed but wasn't. He pressed. Nothing happened. Pressed again, in a different spot. The panel slid a quarter-inch to the left. His whole body went still. Then he looked up at me, grinning. I watched him work the first mechanism. Patient, curious, no rushing, no demanding the secrets reveal themselves before he'd earned them. The opposite of his uncle. Megan appeared in the doorway, watching. Her eyes met mine over the boy's bent head. She understood what the gift meant. Legacy transferred to those who earn it through character. She mouthed 2 words. "Thank you." I nodded once. They left at 4. The boy carried the puzzle box in both hands, promising to show me his progress next week. Megan hugged me longer than usual. The kind of hug that lasts 3 beats too long. The kind that says, "I'm sorry and thank you" at once. I waved until the car disappeared around the bend. The cottage grew quiet. I made coffee, poured it into a plain white mug, nothing like the chipped one Catherine had refused to throw away. That mug was gone now. Part of the old life. Part of what I'd left behind. Her photograph sat on the kitchen windowsill. The one from my grandson Jake's 2nd birthday party. Laughing, silver hair catching the sunlight. The morning light touched her face first, warming the glass. "You were smarter than both of us," I said to the photograph. The trust provisions. The safeguards. The foresight to protect me from something I couldn't imagine. She'd seen the cracks in Derek's character years before I had. Built walls I didn't know existed until I needed them. The phone rang. Bernie's name on the screen. "Victor." His voice carried 40 years of shared history. "Tuesday, still good for fishing. Tuesday's perfect. I'll bring the coffee. You bring the patience. Those bays aren't cooperating this year. They never cooperate. That's why we keep going back." Bernie laughed. The sound of a friendship that had survived everything. "See you at 6. I hung up and looked out the window. The lake had turned gold in the late afternoon light. The heron stood motionless at the water's edge, waiting for something only it could see. That night, I slept through until morning. No waking at 3. No staring at the ceiling. No weight on my chest. Catherine's photograph caught the first light through the windowsill. I made coffee, watched the steam rise, listened to the silence of a house that held no ghosts.